There is a quiet sorrow that follows those who walk a path of deep awareness, a path carved not by ego or ambition, but by an inner calling. These individuals, often referred to as chosen ones, do not choose isolation, isolation chooses them. The solitude isn't punishment. It is preparation. You may have noticed that when your mind begins to awaken, your circle begins to shrink. Conversations that once felt lively now feel hollow. Rooms once filled with warmth start to feel cold. This is not arrogance or bitterness. It is the result of seeing too deeply into the hearts of things, a gaze that cannot be reversed. People who carry a rare inner light often find that their energy disturbs others, not intentionally, but simply by existing in truth. Where there is pretense, their presence feels like confrontation. Where there is numbness, their sensitivity feels like noise. And so, they become misunderstood, sometimes feared, often judged. But this distancing is necessary, not as an escape, but as a retreat into alignment, a way to preserve clarity. You cannot fill from a cup that is constantly being spilled by chaotic energies. You cannot guide if you are always being pulled into confusion. This world is noisy, and those who are here to carry vision, not trends, but vision, must protect their inner silence. The chosen ones are not here to be popular. They are here to be true, and often, truth needs space to breathe. So if you find yourself pulling away, seeking silence, needing space, understand this: you are not broken. You are being refined. In stillness, you will remember what the noise tried to make you forgetting. You were not made to fit in. You were made to see. And with seeing comes solitude, not as a burden, but as a path. There comes a moment on every sincere seeker's path when the world begins to quiet. The noise of others' opinions, the need for validation, the fear of missing out. All of it starts to fade, and in its place rises a profound longing for solitude. Not loneliness, but solituding, a sacred space of silence where something ancient and unshakable begins to bloom. It is in this stillness that the chosen ones, the rare individuals who feel life more deeply, who see more clearly, who carry an invisible weight of awareness, find their true self. And yet, this withdrawal from the crowd is often misunderstood by others and even by themselves in the early stages. People may say, "You've changed. You're isolating yourself. You're too quiet now." And perhaps for a while, those words sting. They make you doubt the wisdom of your retreat. But in time, you begin to realize a truth that cannot be taught. Only living solitude is not a weakness. It is a sign of inner growth. The world teaches us to associate value with visibility. Be seen, be known, be heard, be followed. This is the mantra of the age. But what if your soul isn't here to be consumed? What if it's here to be cultivated, slowly, gently, without spectacle? Then solitude becomes not a detour from the path, it becomes the path. When someone begins to awaken, they start to see beneath the surface of things. The shallow conversations that once passed time now feel draining. The social settings that once brought comfort now bring anxiety. And it's not because the person has grown cold or bitter. It's because their inner world has expanded, and the outer world no longer matches their frequency. A person who is truly growing will often crave silence. They no longer need to perform. They no longer seek approval. They no longer feel the urgency to explain themselves. And so they step back, not to disappear, but to become more fully present with themselves, with the truth, with the mystery that lives behind all things. Solitude is where illusions fall away. When no one is watching, we meet ourselves honestly. There is no one to impress, no mask to wear. In solitude, the ego has less space to perform, and the soul more room to speak. You start to hear the quiet truths that were drowned out by the world's noise. You begin to notice what you actually want, not what you were conditioned to chase. And most importantly, you start to feel your own presence. Not the version of you others project onto you, but you. The being behind the name, the face, the roles. This kind of growth is not glamorous. There are no crowds cheering you on, no instant gratification. Sometimes it's deeply uncomfortable. But it is in these moments, sitting quietly with your thoughts, walking alone, disconnecting from the buzz, that something miraculous begins to take root. A new inner strength, a deep self-trust, a knowing that does not depend on evidence or approval. You become anchored in something eternal. Many people fear solitude because they've never met themselves outside the mirror of others. But the chosen ones, those destined to see beyond the veil, understand that the mirror can lie. It can reflect the world's projections, distortions, expectations. But solitude reflects the soul. And yet we must be clear, solitude is not escapism. It's not running away. In fact, it is the opposite. It is a running toward the essence of things, a deep confrontation with what is real, raw, and unchanging. It takes courage to sit in a quiet room and face yourself, to sift through your wounds without distraction, to trace your patterns back to their roots. It is the work of a warrior, not one who battles outside enemies, but one who disarms the inner chaos that keeps them from peace. Sometimes people ask, why do the chosen ones always seem alone? The answer is simply their journey demands it. Just as a seed must go underground to grow roots before it can rise, the soul must retreat from the world to find depth. You cannot grow in a room that never stops talking. You cannot hear truth in a place obsessed with noise. You cannot transform while being pulled in 100 directions by people who do not see you clearly. Of course, this solitude is not meant to last forever. It is a phase, but a sacred one. It is the chrysalis before the butterfly, the desert before the revelation, the cave before the calling. When you honor this phase instead of resisting it, you give birth to a version of yourself that no crowd could ever manufacture. And from that still place, you begin to attract not more people, but the right people, those who respect your boundaries, understand your silences, and value the truth you carry. And even when you re-enter the world, you are not the same. You are no longer a product of your surroundings, but a presence that shapes them. You carry silence within you like a sacred flame. You no longer need to fill every gap with words or every moment with company. You've learned the art of being, and that changes everything. So if you are in a season of solitude right now, cherish it. Don't let the world convince you that you are missing out. You are not missing anything. You are meeting yourself. And there is no richer, more necessary encounter than that. Remember, trees grow in silence. Stars are born in darkness. Diamonds are formed under pressure, deep underground. And souls awaken in solitude. So do not fear your aloneness. Honor it. Listen to it. Let it stretch you, soften you, strengthen you. You are not withdrawing because you are weak. You are retreating because you are ready to grow. And when you are ready, you will return, not as a seeker of belonging, but as a bearer of light, not needing to fit in, but destined to illuminate. There exists a kind of person in this world who doesn't quite fit in, not because they are flawed or broken, but because they are tuned into something most people never notice. These individuals move through life with a heightened sensitivity, not just to words or emotions, but to energy, the invisible atmosphere of places, the unspoken tension in a room, the vibration behind someone's smile, or the heaviness lingering in someone's silence. These people are not always aware of their gift at first. In fact, they often grow up feeling overwhelmed, different, or even broken. Why does that place drain me so much? Why do I feel exhausted after that conversation? Why do I feel anxious around certain people, even when nothing is being said? These questions arise again and again, quietly, until they begin to understand they are sensing what others miss. They are reading the energy behind the mask. This energetic sensitivity is not a flaw. It is a sign of being chosen. Chosen not in the egotistical sense, but in the sacred sense, chosen to see deeper, feel wider, and hold truths that most cannot face. These individuals, whether they realize it or not, are tuned into an invisible language that life constantly speaks. They walk into a room and feel what others are trying to hide. They meet someone and instantly feel the dissonance between what's being said and what's being meant. They enter a space and sense whether it carries peace or pain, light or distortion. This kind of awareness is not taught in school, nor is it celebrated in a world addicted to surface-level distractions. It is an inner knowing that often isolates before it empowers. The chosen ones feel more because they are wired to sense more, not just physically, but energetically. They are attuned to vibration. Their nervous system acts almost like a radar, picking up shifts, undercurrents, and disruptions in the emotional and spiritual climate around them. This makes them incredibly empathetic, often to the point of exhaustion. They absorb what others project, carry burdens that don't belong to them, and walk through life with invisible weight on their shoulders. Crowds overwhelm them, small talk bores them, loud environments drain them, and while others can move through the world detached or distracted, the chosen ones often find themselves overwhelmed by sensations they can't fully explain. What others call vibes or gut feelings is for them a constant stream of subtle information. They can tell when someone is lying, not because of words, but because of a slight shift in the person's energy. They sense when someone is suffering silently, even behind a smile. They feel when a room is heavy with tension, even when everyone is pretending to be fine. This is not paranoia, it is perception. And while it may look like oversensitivity to the unaware, it is actually a deep form of wisdom. But such wisdom comes at a cost. It can be painful to see what others do not. It can be exhausting to feel so much. That's why many of these individuals end up retreating from the noise of the world. They begin to protect their peace like a sacred ritual, not out of fear, but out of necessity, because they have learned the hard way that not all energy is safe and not every presence is nourishing. You see, when you sense energy deeply, you can no longer tolerate environments that others find comfortable. You can no longer force yourself to engage in shallow interactions. You can no longer pretend you didn't feel that shift in tone, that flicker of dishonesty, that drop in frequency. And this often means you walk alone. But solitude, for the chosen ones, is not loneliness. It is refuge, a place to recalibrate, to breathe without pressure, to exist without absorbing. This ability to sense energy is a sacred responsibility. It is not just for survival, it is also for service. These individuals are often natural healers, artists, empaths, mystics, visionaries. They can sense where something is off, not just in people, but in systems, relationships, environments. They may not always have the language for it, but they know when something is misaligned. And with that knowing comes the urge to bring things back into harmony, to bring clarity to confusion, light to darkness, and truth to illusion. But the chosen ones must first learn to distinguish between what is theirs and what is not. For too long, many carry the emotions, expectations, and energy of others as if it were their own. They take on pain that isn't theirs to heal. They sacrifice themselves for the comfort of others. They stay in environments that slowly destroy them, all because they haven't yet understood the full power of their sensitivity. True growth begins when they realize this sensing energy is not a curse. It is a compass. And that compass only works when it is respected. Boundaries are not just emotional tools for the chosen ones. They are energetic necessities. Learning to say no, to retreat, to cleanse, to protect one's aura. These are not luxuries. They are survival skills for those carrying sacred sight. And once they learn to honor this gift, rather than be ashamed of it, everything changes. They begin to navigate life with more clarity. They stop explaining themselves to those who will never understand. They stop trying to fit in where their soul never belonged. They trust the invisible language their body has been speaking all along. They start recognizing other sensitive souls, not just through words, but through resonance. They gather in quiet circles where depth replaces noise, where presence replaces performance. They become teachers, creators, guides, not by preaching, but by being. Their mere presence becomes a balm. Their energy becomes a transmission. So if you find yourself overwhelmed by crowds, exhausted by noise, or drained by certain people, know this: you are not weak. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are simply awake. You are tuned into the truth behind the illusion. You are sensing what most ignore. You are here to walk a different path, one of alignment, intuition, and deep presence. This gift will challenge you, but it will also protect you. And in time, it will lead you to the people, the places, and the purpose that match your true vibration. Because you were never meant to stay in the shallow waters. You were always meant to feel the current beneath the surface. You were always meant to sense the unseen. You are one of the chosen. And your sensitivity is not your weakness. It is your power. There's a quiet kind of loneliness that follows those who live in truth. It's not the kind of loneliness that stems from lack of company, but from the rarefied air of honesty. A way of being that, while pure, often leaves you walking alone. Truth does not create crowds. It creates distance. This is one of the paradoxes of awakening. The more you grow into your truth, the more authentic, awake, and deeply aligned you become. The fewer people you find around you, not because you have turned bitter or unkind, but because the space you now occupy cannot hold the same illusions that others still cling to. The honest soul will find, again and again, that telling the truth, or simply being the truth, often pushes others away. Why? Because truth confronts. It doesn't coddle. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't play along. It asks us to take off the mask, to stand without the scaffolding of ego, and to look at life, at ourselves as it is, not as we wish it to be. And most people are not ready for that. When you begin to live in truth, even silently, you become a mirror, not a mirror of appearances, but of essence. You reflect what others are avoiding. You radiate clarity in a world that thrives on confusion. And this presence, while not aggressive or loud, it can be deeply uncomfortable to those still addicted to their illusions. The truth is raw. It peels back layers. It asks difficult questions. It disrupts the false peace of pretending. And when you carry that truth in your energy, not just in your words, but in your very being, people sense it. They may not understand why they pull away, why they grow defensive, why they suddenly feel uneasy around you, but something in them recalls, not because you are wrong, but because you are real. And realness is rare. We live in a world trained to value comfort over clarity, convenience over confrontation, and harmony over honesty. But the chosen ones, those who have seen behind the veil, cannot play along anymore. They cannot shrink into silence. They cannot lie to themselves or others just to maintain appearances. Their very soul begins to revolt at the thought of betraying its own knowing. And so, distance happens. You start to lose people, not all at once, but slowly. Some fade away because your presence reminds them of their own stagnation. Others lash out, accusing you of being too much, too intense, or too serious. Still others simply drift, unable to explain why the connection no longer feels the same. It's not personal. It's energetic. You've shifted, and they have not. And this can be deeply painful. Because the truth teller often longs for connection just as much as anyone else. They want to be seen, held, understood. But they've also tasted the cost of abandoning themselves to belong. And once you've betrayed your truth enough times, you realize the price is too high. So you stay honest, even if it means being alone. This is not a martyrdom. It's not about superiority. It's about alignment. Living in truth means choosing integrity over approval. It means choosing depth over ease. It means choosing clarity even when it leads to solitude. And that solitude becomes sacred. In the beginning, it may feel like exile. You'll ask yourself, why am I always the one walking away? Why do people keep disappearing? Why can't I just go back to how things were? But in time, you'll come to see the distance was not rejection. It was refinement. You weren't being punished. You were being prepared. Because truth doesn't just create distance from others. It also creates space for others. The right others. Those who are also walking in honesty. Those who don't need you to be smaller or softer or quieter to feel safe. Those who are nourished, not threatened, by your clarity. They may be few, but they will find you, and they will stay. Still, the path of truth is often narrow. It is a road with few signs and fewer companions. And yet, those who walk it carry something unshakable. Their solitude is not empty. It is filled with self-trust. Their silence is not hollow. It is alive with knowing. Their eyes do not dart for approval. They are fixed on what is real. Because the truth, once seen, cannot be unseen, and once lived cannot be unlived. It alters the fabric of your being. You no longer can pretend. You no longer can tolerate what drains you. You no longer can nod along to what you know is false. You would rather sit alone in your truth than stand surrounded in deception. And this is your power. Because in a world that trades masks and illusions like currency, the one who chooses to be honest, radically, vulnerably, unwaveringly honest, becomes a kind of lighthouse, not loud, not forceful, but steady, illuminating, unbothered by the storm. Some will pass by. Others will curse the light. But the ones who are ready, truly ready, will find their way to you. So, if you find yourself distanced, misunderstood, misread, misjudged, because of your truth, hold steady. Do not contort yourself to fit what you've outgrown. Do not silence your knowing to soothe someone else's denial. Do not trade your peace for proximity. Let the distance do its work. Let it refine you. Let it clarify who you are. Let it strip away what was never real. And in that space, vast, quiet, sometimes lonely, you will find a freedom that no shallow connection can offer. A freedom that comes not from being accepted, but from being true. Because you were not made to blend in. You were made to see. You were made to speak. You were made to stand, even when it means standing alone. Truth will cost you, but it will never bankrupt your soul. And in time, you will understand the distance it created was never a loss. It was a clearing for what was always meant to find you. There is a kind of clarity that only comes in silence, in a world saturated with noise. The ping of notifications, the buzz of opinions, the pressure to stay constantly connected. Clarity becomes a rare and fragile thing. Vision, true vision, is not born from endless stimulation or the rush of activity. It is born in stillness, in solitude, in the quiet space between distractions. And this is why those who are called to see clearly, to lead, to create, to heal, to build something meaningful, must guard their inner world with vigilance. Because too much external contact dilutes vision. This is not about arrogance or detachment. It's not about becoming a recluse or rejecting others. It's about recognizing that clarity has a cost. You cannot remain deeply attuned to your purpose, your inner compass, your sacred work, while constantly swimming in the currents of other people's thoughts, energies, and expectations. The more you absorb from the outside world, the more distorted your inner signals become. The more voices you listen to, the harder it is to hear your own. Many people live in a kind of energetic crowding. They wake up and immediately check their phones, scrolling through images, messages, opinions, and noise before even breathing into their own body. From the first hour of the day, their mind belongs not to them, but to the world. Then they move through their day absorbing more conversations, media, tasks, stimulation, until they fall asleep again, exhausted and empty, without ever having truly touched their own thoughts. In this state, there is no space for vision, only reaction. But the ones who are called to see, to truly see, cannot afford to live this way. Their gift is subtle. It whispers rather than shouts, and it requires presence, focus, space, The vision they carry is not found in the crowd, it is found in the cave, in the walks alone, in the journal pages, in the moments of sitting quietly while others rush past. When you have a deep calling, you cannot your energy be available to everyone, not because you are above them, but because your clarity is too sacred to compromise. You begin to realize that your attention is not just a resource. It is a creative force. Where it goes, your life follows. And if it is always scattered outward, your inner world becomes thin, fragmented, diluted. You start to see how even innocent interactions can subtly alter your frequency. A conversation here, a comment there. Suddenly, your once clear vision feels cloudy. Doubt creeps in. You start to question your intuition. You begin comparing yourself to others. You lose your rhythm. This is not always dramatic. It happens slowly, quietly, invisibly. Until one day you realize you can't hear yourself anymore. You're not sure what you believe, what you want, or where you're going. This is what dilution feels like. And this is why chosen individuals, those with a mission, a vision, a unique frequency, often find themselves needing more solitude than others. It's not a preference, it's a requirement. Their inner world is their temple. Their mind is their workshop. Their intuition is their compass. And all of these must be protected from the noise of constant contact. We are living in an age where people are more connected than ever, yet more disconnected from themselves than ever. The world encourages overstimulation as normal. Endless scrolling, constant checking, a full calendar, a crowded mind. But overstimulation kills vision. It keeps you reactive, anxious, scattered. It tricks you into thinking that productivity is power, when in truth, clarity is the real power, and clarity comes from intentional space. If you are someone with a deep purpose, an artist, a thinker, a spiritual seeker, a builder, a leader, you must understand the energetic toll of being too available. You must become ruthless with your focus. You must learn to say no, not just to obligations, but to noise. You must unplug, step back, retreat, often and deliberately, not as an escape, but as a return. A return to your center, a return to your truth, a return to the vision that only you can see. This doesn't mean you isolate forever. It means you choose wisely. You learn to discern who energizes your vision and who drains it. You recognize the difference between connection and consumption. You stop giving everyone equal access to your inner space. Because the truth is, not everyone should be in your field. Not every voice deserves to shape your thoughts. Not every interaction is nourishing. Some energies blur your vision. Some people bring fog instead of light. And when you are here to see, that fog is costly. Many chosen ones feel guilty for withdrawing. They feel pressured to always be available, always be social, always be on. But this guilt is misplaced. The real question is not, are you available to everyone? The real question is, are you available to your own vision? Because if not, then you are losing yourself to the noise. And the world does not need another person echoing the crowd. The world needs those who can see clearly and speak from that clarity. Your vision is not random. It was given to you for a reason. And it requires protection. Protect it by setting boundaries. Protect it by saying no. Protect it by creating safe spaces of silence. Protect it by stepping away from the flood of external input. Protect it by trusting that your soul speaks in stillness, not in static. And trust that your greatest breakthroughs, your deepest insights, your most powerful clarity will not come from being more connected, but from being more centered. Not from hearing more voices, but from hearing your own. So if you are feeling cloudy, overwhelmed, unfocused, check your contact points. How much of your energy is being spent outward? How many opinions are you absorbing that have nothing to do with your path? How often are you checking in with others before checking in with yourself? And if the answer is too much, then you know what to do. Pull back. Reclaim your attention. Guard your inner world like it matters, because it does. Because when you are clear, you are powerful. When you are focused, you are unstoppable. And when your vision is undiluted, you become a force the world cannot ignore. So stay rooted, stay still, stay sovereign. Your vision needs space to breathe, and too much external contact suffocates it. There is a kind of loneliness that isn't hollow. It doesn't echo with pain or desperation. It doesn't claw at the heart or beg for attention. It just is, silent, spacious, calm. It's a different kind of loneliness, one that doesn't stem from rejection or neglect, but from growth, from awakening, from shedding layers that no longer fit. In truth, not all loneliness is emptiness. Sometimes, loneliness is the exact environment your soul needs to remember itself. It is not a vacuum, but a container, a space cleared out by the departure of the unnecessary, the superficial, the distracting. It feels like absence on the outside, but it holds a quiet fullness on the inside, a kind of solitude that does not drain, but restores. For much of life, we are conditioned to associate being alone with something gone wrong. We are taught that fulfillment comes from being surrounded by people and by activity, by noise. From a young age, we are rewarded for being sociable, for blending in, for filling up space with sound and presence. And so, when the crowds thin, or the conversations quiet, or the invitations stop, we often panic. We think we've failed, that we've been left behind. But there is another story, one less told, the story of sacred solitude. There comes a time in every inner journey when the soul begins to unhook itself from external attachments, not in bitterness, but in wisdom. You no longer crave the same conversations, the same environments, the same company. Not because you're better, but because your frequency has changed. You're no longer content to play roles, to perform connection, to pretend. You want something real, something still, something deep. And often, to find that, you must walk alone for a while. This phase can feel lonely, but it is not empty. In fact, it is often the most full your spirit has ever been. Full of clarity, full of presence, full of quiet truths that could never rise to the surface in the noise of constant contact. When you are alone, you begin to hear again, not the voices of others, but the voice beneath your own. You start to notice how much of your life was shaped by the expectations of those around you. How often you compromised your rhythm to match someone else's. How deeply you had been conditioned to believe that closeness equals connection, that attention equals love, that silence equals absence. But not all silence is abandonment, and not all loneliness is lack. Some loneliness is space being made for what is truly meant for you. Some loneliness is the soul clearing the stage for a more honest performance. Some loneliness is a healing, not a wound. There's a loneliness that comes from missing others. And then there's a loneliness that comes from finally meeting yourself. That second kind, it's not really loneliness at all. It only wears the mask of loneliness because it looks so different from what the world has told you joy should look like. But it holds a deep satisfaction, a grounding, a liberation from the need to be constantly seen to feel real. When you step into this kind of aloneness, you begin to find power in simplicity. You no longer chase validation. You no longer hustle to belong. You start to belong to yourself. And in that belonging, you realize how many of your past connections were built on fear. The fear of being left, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being alone. But when you make peace with being alone, the fear loses its grip. You no longer settle. You no longer chase. You no longer confuse company with companionship. You begin to choose differently. Not from a place of lack, but from a place of fullness. You don't need someone to complete you. You simply desire those who complement the peace you've already found. And suddenly, the loneliness becomes sacred. You start to cherish the long walks with no destination, the quiet mornings with no demands, the deep breaths in empty rooms. You see that these are not empty moments. They are expansive moments. Moments where you are not performing, not pleasing, not proving, just being. In those moments, you reconnect with your essence. the self that existed before the labels, before the masks, before the noise. You meet the part of you that is not afraid of solitude because it remembers that solitude is not exile. It is encounter. The world moves fast. It encourages you to be constantly connected, constantly stimulated, constantly busy. But the soul doesn't thrive in chaos. The soul grows in quiet, in stillness, in the empty space that modern life tries so hard to avoid. So if you are in a season of solitude, do not rush through it. Do not try to fill it too quickly. Sit with it. Walk with it. Let it teach you. Let it strip away what no longer serves. Let it deepen your roots so that when the time comes to connect again, you connect from wholeness, not from hunger. And understand this: being alone does not mean you are unloved. It means you are being asked to love yourself more deeply than ever before. Not all loneliness is emptiness. Some of it is preparation. Some of it is clarity. Some of it is a sacred pause before a fuller, richer chapter. Loneliness can feel like silence. But within that silence is a symphony of becoming. It is not the absence of something. It is the presence of you. Silence has a reputation it does not deserve. In a world that equates noise with relevance, movement with meaning, and volume with value, silence is often misunderstood. Feared, even. It's painted as emptiness, associated with discomfort, awkwardness, or worse, rejection. When someone grows quiet, others assume something is wrong. When a room falls silent, people rush to fill it. When life itself becomes quiet, we wonder if we're falling behind. But here's what most people miss: silence is not a punishment. It is a tool of recalibration, of revelation, of repair. It is in silence that the soul speaks most clearly. It is in silence that healing begins. It is in silence that what was scattered finds its center again. Most people are afraid of silence because they don't know what to do with it. We've been conditioned to think of silence as a void, a signal of loss or failure, as though silence means something is missing. But silence is often the opposite of absence. It is presence distilled. It is pure being, without distraction, without performance, without distortion. When a person chooses silence, deliberately, with intention, it isn't always because they are withdrawing or shutting down. Often, they are tuning in. They are listening inward. They are holding space for something deeper than words can reach. There is a wisdom in silence that speech cannot touch. Words have their place. They clarify, they connect, they reveal. But they can also cloud, distract, and dilute. Words can be armor. They can be decoration. They can hide what is true just as easily as they reveal it. Silence has no such agenda. Silence waits. It does not argue. It does not beg. It simply is. And in its stillness, everything false eventually falls away. Silence is not what happens when there's nothing left to say. It is often what happens when there's too much to say and none of it would serve. It's what rises when we stop performing, stop pretending, stop projecting, and simply allow things to be as they are. That is why silence is sacred to those who are awake. Not everyone understands this. In fact, many will misinterpret your silence. They'll think you're angry, depressed, disengaged. They'll try to pull you back into the noise. But those who have begun to value truth over appearances, peace over performance, depth over distraction, they know that silence is not emptiness. It is alignment. When you are overwhelmed, silence becomes a sanctuary. When you are heartbroken, silence becomes a healer. When you are confused, silence becomes a guide. And when you are growing, silence becomes a cocoon, holding space for your becoming without demanding you explain it. We often search for answers in books, in people, in movement. But silence offers something none of these can: a return to your own knowing. In silence, you hear the soft voice beneath all the noise, the one that isn't shouting, but whispering, the one that doesn't come from fear or habit or expectation, but from presence, from essence. This is why many spiritual traditions honor silence as a path to wisdom. It is not passive. It is not empty. It is not a sign of giving up. It is a practice of tuning in, of stepping away from the external clutter to make space for inner clarity. You begin to realize that every time you retreat into silence, you're not disconnecting. You're reconnecting. You're coming back to your center. You're placing your ear against the quiet chest of the universe and hearing the heartbeat of something deeper than explanation. Silence also teaches restraint, not as repression, but as discernment. You don't have to respond to everything. You don't have to explain yourself constantly. You don't have to prove your worth in noise. Silence reminds you that not everything requires your reaction. Not every question needs an immediate answer. Not every provocation deserves your energy. It is in silence that you begin to trust the power of stillness. You begin to see how much is revealed when you stop trying to control. How much settles when you stop stirring the waters. How much becomes clear when you stop filling every space. And yes, silence can be uncomfortable. It forces you to sit with what you've been avoiding, the feelings you pushed down, the truths you denied, the grief you postponed. But discomfort is not the enemy. It is the doorway. Silence brings it all to the surface. Not to punish you, but to free you. To clear the noise is to create space for healing. In silence, the body exhales, the mind unclenches, the heart softens, the soul breathes, and from this place of spaciousness, insight emerges, not always in the form of words or answers, but in felt knowing, in peace, in clarity that doesn't have to be explained. The most profound shifts in life often happen in quiet, the turning point no one saw coming, the insight that rose in the middle of a walk alone, the healing that began when you finally stopped trying to force things into place, that moment of deep exhale, when you stopped performing and simply rested in being. This is the silent revolution, when you stop seeking validation from the noise and begin trusting the guidance found in stillness. So, if you find yourself in a season of silence, honor it. Don't rush to fill it. Don't apologize for it. Don't mistake it for weakness or loss. This is not punishment. It is preparation. It is protection. It is transformation. You are not falling behind. You are falling into alignment. You are not missing out. You are moving inward. You are not being punished. You are being refined. Because silence is a tool for the soul. It cuts through the fog. It reveals what noise conceals. It softens what the world hardens. It speaks in ways that words never can. So sit with it. Let it stretch you. Let it strip you. Let it show you what you were too busy to see. And in time, you'll realize silence was never empty. It was full of everything you needed to remember. And so, if you find yourself walking a quieter path pulled toward solitude, sensing more than you can explain, losing the need to please, drifting away from the noise of the crowd, understand this: you are not falling apart. You are falling into alignment. This path was never meant to be crowded. It was meant to be clear. Because the deeper you go into yourself, the fewer people can follow. Not everyone is meant to walk with you. Not everyone can hold the vision you've been given. And that's okay. You were not chosen to blend in. You were chosen to become. In your silence there is strength. In your solitude there is clarity. In your truth there is fire. And in your distance there is direction. Let the world misunderstand you. For a time, let them question your quiet. Let them walk away if they must. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to understand yourself, to become who you truly are beneath the masks, beneath the noise, beneath the expectations. So walk your path, even if it's silent. Speak your truth, even if your voice trembles. Guard your energy, even if it means being alone. And trust. Trust that those meant for your light will find you, not because you chased them, but because you became impossible to miss. In the end, the chosen ones do not seek the world's attention. They carry something greater: inner vision, sacred solitude, and a soul anchored in truth. That is the real power, and it can never be taken from you.